What if your doubt is not a failure? What if it is exactly where you are supposed to be? A person walks out of a church, stops, and does not turn back, not because they hate what they left, but because something inside them can no longer pretend. That moment is more common than people admit. The quiet break, the pause at the threshold, the feeling that belief has become heavier than truth. For many, doubt does not arrive like rebellion. It arrives like exhaustion, like honesty finally refusing to wear borrowed language. And that is what makes it so unsettling. Because if doubt feels more truthful than faith, then the soul begins to wonder whether losing certainty is not collapse at all, but the beginning of something harder, cleaner, and more real. Maybe the real fracture does not happen when a person stops believing. Maybe it happens earlier, when they realize they have been repeating words their inner life no longer recognizes as true. For years, millions of people carry the same quiet shame. I tried to believe. I could not. Something must be wrong with me. This is one of the loneliest spiritual experiences a person can have. Not open disbelief, not anger, but the private humiliation of wanting faith and being unable to force it into existence. They pray and feel nothing. They listen and remain unconvinced. They repeat sacred words and hear them fall flat inside their own chest. Everyone around them seems certain, surrendered, at peace. So they assume the defect must be personal, moral, spiritual. But shame grows most easily where honesty is forbidden. And in many lives, the real wound is not doubt itself. It is being taught that doubt is evidence of failure. It is the hidden pressure to perform conviction, even when the soul is empty. To smile during prayers that no longer reach upward. To kneel while inwardly standing outside the room. To pretend belief is still alive, because admitting otherwise would cost too much love, too much belonging, too much identity. Or nothing is wrong with you. Maybe belief was never your path. Maybe the question was always more important than the answer. Hell speaks here not to destroy faith, but to expose the possibility that some souls are not built for easy surrender. Some people cannot silence the mind long enough to accept what others accept in peace. They test, resist, dissect, pull at every thread, and keep asking long after the room has decided the discussion is over. That does not necessarily make them arrogant. Sometimes it makes them painfully sincere, because they would rather remain outside than fake devotion inside. Hell knows how dangerous this is to institutions. A person who can live without false certainty is much harder to control than one who needs belonging more than truth, and that is why doubt can feel so threatening to every system built on quick obedience. Not because questions are evil, but because real questions loosen the power of inherited answers. They make imitation harder. They make ritual more honest or impossible. And systems built on repetition often fear nothing more than a soul that keeps asking what all of this is actually for. Every major tradition has a place for the seeker, the one who cannot stop asking, the one for whom faith does not come easy. They are not less. They are essential. Religious history is full of figures who wrestled, doubted, resisted, wandered, argued, and still remained central to the spiritual imagination. Not because certainty made them holy, but because their refusal to lie made them real. The seeker matters because they prevent religion from becoming sleep. They keep the questions alive when everyone else is tempted to repeat inherited answers without feeling their weight. A faith with no room for struggle becomes brittle. A tradition with no room for honest doubt becomes afraid of its own foundations. That is why the seeker is not a side character. The seeker is often the one keeping the soul of the tradition alive. They preserve tension. They refuse cheap peace. They remind the community that truth is not honored by pretending difficult questions do not exist. And, in that sense, the doubter is not standing outside the spiritual story. Very often, they are the reason the story has not gone empty inside. What if God, if there is a God, needs people who argue with him, who push back, who refuse to simply accept. Heaven lifts her eyes to the stars because this is where the question becomes less rebellious and more profound. Perhaps unquestioning faith is not always the highest form of devotion. Perhaps there is a kind of holiness in refusing to call something true until it has survived contact with the whole weight of your mind. A God worthy of worship would not need fragile agreement. He would not fear scrutiny. He would not collapse under examination. Maybe the ones who wrestle hardest are not farthest from the divine, but closest to taking it seriously. And because argument is often the sign that the question still matters enough to fight with. Indifference is colder than doubt could ever be. A person who still argues with God has not gone numb. They have not stopped caring. They are still turned toward the possibility that truth exists, even if they can no longer accept the form in which it was handed to them. And perhaps that longing, stripped of politeness and religious performance, is more prayer than many practiced believers realize. The most dangerous person in any religion is the one who stopped asking. The most valuable one is the one who cannot stop. A labyrinth becomes the right image because spiritual life is not always a straight line toward certainty. Sometimes it is confusion, return, dead ends, false exits, and the exhausting refusal to settle for what sounds comforting but feels hollow. The person who has stopped asking may look peaceful, but peace and numbness are not the same thing. And the one who keeps questioning may look unstable, but instability is sometimes what truth feels like when false structures begin to break. Institutions often prefer calm repetition to honest disturbance. Yet every serious encounter with truth is disruptive at first. That is why the relentless seeker matters. They are willing to remain lost longer than others in order to avoid finding the wrong answer too soon. They know that a false home can be more dangerous than wandering, that a premature answer can imprison the mind more effectively than open uncertainty, and that spiritual maturity may require the courage to stay inside the maze until every easy exit has been exposed as counterfeit. Maybe you were not made to kneel. Maybe you were made to question everything until something real is left standing. The two figures facing each other in silence become the right image because this is no longer about simple belief versus unbelief. It is about what kind of soul you are. Some people are built for trust first. Others are built for fire, for testing, for stripping illusion away layer by layer until only what can survive remains. That path is not easier. It is lonelier. It often looks like distance, failure, rebellion, even spiritual dryness. But perhaps it is a vocation of its own. To refuse inherited certainty, to burn through imitation, to challenge every answer that arrives too quickly, not because you hate truth, but because you want it badly enough to destroy every counterfeit version before you give your life to it. Maybe kneeling too early would have been the real betrayal. Maybe your task was never simple submission, but discernment severe enough to survive manipulation, fear, guilt, and the human tendency to confuse authority with revelation. Maybe you were made not to reject the sacred, but to keep cutting away everything that pretended to be sacred without being able to endure light. Your doubt is not the opposite of faith. It might be the most honest form of it. Open sky becomes the final image because doubt, at its deepest level, is not always closure. Sometimes it is openness so radical it can no longer lie. It is the refusal to worship what feels dead, the refusal to repeat what the soul cannot yet call true, the refusal to use certainty as a shield against the terrifying work of actually seeking. If faith means anything real, it cannot simply be inherited language protected from examination. It must be able to survive contact with darkness, absence, silence, disappointment, and the full violence of the questioning mind. Maybe that is why doubt hurts so much, because it is not always distance from the sacred. Sometimes it is the soul's refusal to settle for anything less than the sacred itself. And maybe one day you will discover that what felt like exile was actually preparation, that what felt like loss was purification, That what looked like unbelief from the outside was, in its deepest form, a refusal to give your heart to anything false. If so, then doubt was never the opposite side of faith. It was the fire through which a more honest faith had to pass before it could become real. See you in the next video, where the questions only get darker.